to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
Thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And they got away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we're all up in your faces. Time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Weekend edition. I used to call it quarantine edition, but it's, I don't know, nobody's quarantining anymore, so it's a weekend edition. It's the Conan's doing too much rock and roll activities to busy himself doing the show in the regular slot that has happened for 9.5 years. But very excited today to be presenting a artist and friend that I like quite a bit. You may know him from Coordinated Suicides, Caryatids. You may know him from Pink City, if you go way back in the day, back in the cut, like I do. He is a very talented man, and looking forward to talking to M. Martin. So that'll be happening shortly. Before we do that, welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I am your host, Conan Neutron. I am a rock and roll lifer that has been touring and recording for 23 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron, The Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this very long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect, but who may not be household names. This is episode 343. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, archives that are available for free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding, at ProtonicReversal.com. However, if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at Patreon.com/ProtonicReversal will achieve that goal. If you like the show, even if it's a single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around the internet, and even leave a review. All of that helps discover the show for people and beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords. This is a darn nice thing to do as well. So without any further ado, let's get into it with M. Martin. Mike, welcome to the show, man.
Hi, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
We were supposed to do this like 2 other times, and
yeah,
to open the veil a little bit. So glad we're finally able to do it.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
I think so. The main live thing you have going right now is Caryatids. Am I saying it correctly? By the way,
you are correct.
Okay,
you are saying it correctly. It's an art history term for everybody taking score at home. What Caryatids are the pillars that hold up Greek temples that are carved in the shape of women.
Okay.
And so that's what it is. It's like they're holding up the temple. And
nice.
The way that I've always sort of operated with naming bands is finding a phrase that relates to the content of whatever the project is about somehow, right, in a really abstract, emotional way. And so Caryatids sort of just made sense to me. And I was like, well, nobody else has used this, so let's just go for it. And yeah, that's sort of where it came from.
Yeah, well, you've always struck me as a very deeply thoughtful dude towards all of your music. Like
Thank you.
It's very prepared. There's a lot of thought and intent behind it.
Yeah, it tends to be that way. I think that I've always been one of those people where I'm sort of afraid to let it be as uncontrolled as it sometimes seems, I think.
Right.
I want it to be a very controlled and to have that sort of, there's a lot of intentionality behind what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and when did you first if I remember correctly, I think Pink City was your first
It
like
was.
live band, right? Yeah, that was like it
That
was kind of
that was my first project.
your first real music thing.
That
Yeah.
was my first real music thing. Yeah.
So, but I have known you to be a music fan for
Yeah.
like a lot longer.
A lot longer. Yeah.
So what originally going a little back in the day? What originally made
Started
you
me off?
want to do that? The
Oh,
world
well,
of pain.
well,
Pain and
yeah,
reward.
right. I mean, God, did I ever find out about that?
Yeah. It's not all bread and roses.
Not all sunshine and roses. But I started getting into music when I was in 5th grade.
Right.
And I'd always liked music when I was really young. Like my mom and my dad liked to play a lot of opera and a lot of classical music and a lot of musicals when I was a kid, but not that much rock and roll. And so at one point in the 5th grade, I said to my mom in the late 90s, Mom, what do the Beatles sound like? And she looked at me like I had 3 heads. And
Sure. Yeah.
she was like, are you serious? I was like, yeah, I don't really know what they sound like. And she said to my dad, he hasn't heard the Beatles. And my dad said, I think we have to do something about that. And so I ended up getting the Blue Album compilation of the Beatles.
Oh yeah, the red and blue one. Yeah. I used to have those.
My brother got the red one and I got the blue one.
Yeah.
And that was really, I haven't had much in my life that I would call like a real like conversion experience, road to Damascus type thing, but that was it. That was like it. I was like, I heard Here Comes the Sun, and then I heard Strawberry Fields Forever, and then I heard like something, one of those incredible songs, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the greatest. It just, how it is when you first fall in love with music and you can't even like say what it means. You're just sort of like, this is the thing.
Right. It can't even be properly articulated as to why it's blowing your mind.
It can't be properly articulated. It was like that. And then I just started getting into it from there as a kid. Like one of the first albums I really discovered when I was a kid, and I think this is actually going to be pretty interesting, is I was a huge fan in 8th grade of Animals by Pink Floyd.
Okay.
I was a huge fan of that record.
Yeah.
And I started really out with like listening to like a bunch of like classic rock like stuff, and then as I started developing more in high school, I started getting into more like outre music, like we're like sort of like gateway outre music, I would say. Like there was a period in when I was a junior in high school, I think, where I was listening to nothing but Trout Mask Replica for like 2 months.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
which explains a lot about me.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's like not exactly what true heads know, of course, but not exactly a common
it was
playlist.
I was definitely one of those types of high schoolers. My brother and my sister have some very funny stories about me trying to play Captain Beefheart for them, and it not work. It didn't work out too well.
I was gonna say
it did not work out too well. I was really, the zeal of the convert type stuff, and it was really hilarious.
Don't you get it?
Don't you get it? They're listening. He's playing all these weird phrases like in a row. It's like a song. Can't you hear it? And they're like, Mike, this sounds terrible. And it's like, oh.
I think that. Like maybe the first record, like you could kind of maybe get one over from like classic rock lovers, You get Electricity is a jam,
right?
Like
sure.
But even then, it's still feeling like it's coming from Mars. So you get into like Trout Mask and stuff. It's just like frame of reference for anything here,
right? And I mean, I was into a bunch of stuff, and then so I was a huge music fan for a really long time.
Right. You were a listener. You were an avid fan.
Right.
You were like a bit of an epicure, maybe, of like the things that you enjoy.
A little bit. A little bit, I would say. Yeah.
And so when you start going down the path of like Beefheart and stuff like that, what are the things that really kind of jumped out at you, band-wise?
going at that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like in your development, where's
In my
where's the path?
development, yeah. A good question. I was really influenced by Syd Barrett. I liked Syd Barrett a lot. I like Sly and the Family Stone a lot.
Nice.
I like the Velvet Underground's White Light, White Heat was really important for me.
Yeah, great record.
And like, I mean, a lot of like really sort of, I would say like basic beginner building block type stuff, but like for a lot of like alt-ish type music, you know what I mean? But
Right.
I would say that in terms of what was most important in terms of my development of what I eventually ended up doing, I did like I liked Syd Barrett a lot. I liked Neil Young a lot. That I actually came to Neil Young a little later.
Neil Young.
But I really, that was a huge influence on stuff I ended up doing. And in terms of like the noisier stuff, Flipper really changed my life. Because what I loved about Flipper was it was incredibly heavy. It was so sludgy, and it was really noisy, and it was really crazy. But then there were these lyrics that were like these really meaningful / hilarious / everything. Just like Flipper's lyrics can be high comedy or like the most brutal drama imaginable, and
sometimes in the same song. Yeah.
sometimes in the same song, and sometimes they can sing the same lyrics and it'll scan either way depending on your mood, and that was really interesting to me. And then I think the band that I would say that the band that had like one of the biggest influences on stuff I ended up doing was Public Image Limited. And I got that in Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco for my birthday when I was a junior in high school. And it's interesting because one of them definitely took, and the other
and the other one's Yankee Hotel Foxtrot.
The other one is Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. And I mean, I think Yankee Hotel Foxtrot's a pretty good record, but it was like of the ones that like really hit me. Like that one, it was Metal Box by Public Image Limited.
Now, were you already? Did you already know Sex Pistols and whatnot, or did you come to?
I did know the Sex Pistols. I had a period of I discovered like the first Ramones record, the Sex Pistols record.
Sure, yeah.
Black Sabbath, Paranoid. I discovered it all around the same time, and then of course there was a bit of Nirvana later because of course everybody had heard Nirvana.
It was ubiquitous and good. I mean,
I mean, yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's not like you can have anything that's. It's not like anything was going to lead you wrong there, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it was. So I had heard the Sex Pistols before Public Image Limited, but I mean, this was the early days of searching music online and stuff.
Sure. Yeah, you didn't have this instant availability of literally everything all the time.
I remember I looked at a lot of old Amazon reviews when I was a little kid. Like,
funny. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would look at it and be like, "Oh, that sounds interesting," or "I don't know about that," and then I would listen to like the samples online and be like, "Oh, this is really cool." And I felt like I was like one of those people where I continually like knew just enough to seem like I really knew what I was talking about. And then I would like keep re-upping my knowledge until I actually did know what I was talking about.
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till I make it. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of that. I think that's just like a common sort of insecurity / finding yourself type things.
Yeah, that's not uncommon,
right?
To be sure, but I think that it's notable because like the Metal Box second edition, whatever you want to call it, is right. Like it's a I mean, pretty experimental record. Ultimately,
Yeah,
even
it
for the
is.
time. Even now, it's like, wow, it's kind of bold that like.
Even now, it is astonishing that they even got to make that record.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's crazy. Let alone have it be like with the notoriety and profile that it had.
oh yeah, no, it's a bizarre record, and
Yeah.
I mean, it was a huge influence on me. And I think that's something that is helpful to understand, is that a lot of the music I went on to make, especially like the really aggressive stuff,
Right.
to me, a lot of it was like, and this isn't the whole story by any stretch, but a lot of it was sort of like PIL and sludge metal clothing to me. And
Oh,
so-
sure. Yeah. No, I get like the sensibility and like how things fit
Sense-
together and stuff. Yeah. No, I
Right.
get that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then after I discovered all of that, I started getting into more like AMREP type noise, type really heavy, sludgy, noisy stuff. I was I was an early, I was on the internet in the early 2000s, and I was young, and I was trying to devour as much music as I could. And something about that stuff really spoke to me, and it became more and more of a thing. I just was really into it, and more than I was really into it, it felt like sort of a safe place emotionally for me, because I've always been a fairly intense emotional person, and so to make music that was the thing. When I was starting to think about actually doing this for real, I was like, I was drawn to that because it felt like a safe place to express myself emotionally.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's an avenue for a lot of artists.
Yeah.
It's well, and I feel like there's some forms that are more receptive to that than others. I think music's definitely one where you can definitely lay it all bare, and it's considered laudable, not embarrassing normally.
Yeah, and I mean, that was really appealing to me.
Right.
That whole idea of being able to just throw it out there, and then have people be like, oh yeah, that was a cool song, and you'll be like, I can get paid doing this? That's cool.
Yeah. Not that much though. Don't get too excited.
Not that much. Definitely not that much.
So how does Pink City come together? And for those that are fans of the show, of course, that's with Jake Healy, who is in the Fantastic Sugar Horse now.
Yes.
I of course know the story, but I think that it's a band that is people like in the same way that PIL was by design sort of anti-image. I think like you presented Pink City as very much like, here's this thing and the music's gonna do the talking.
Yeah, I think that was as much because of I had a really severe reluctance to, in retrospect, to sort of get in front of it and promote it in some ways, because it
was more or less, I mean, that was your first band.
It was
really.
my first band, yeah. And anyway, I'll start at the beginning. So Jake and I were members of message board for Steve Albini's electrical audio recording studio. And there was I had, of course, wanted to make music for years, but I was something about me is that I am actually very, very fearful and very frightened of doing things. And I desperately wanted to make like rock and roll or whatever. But I was very frightened, and I was frightened because I knew the music I would make would probably be pretty dark. And I was afraid because I didn't want people to be put off by it. And but at the same time, I think that anybody who makes music, there comes a certain point where you just don't care about that, and you end up doing it, and it just is what it is.
Yeah.
And the way it happened was almost by chance. There was a little contest of saying record your own song or whatever weekly thing, and it was like this little weekly thing on that board that people would do. They would make they'd make their songs, and they would be great songs, and it would be around a challenge. And the theme of that challenge was either do an AMREP cover or do a write your own thing. And I can't remember if it was Jake who said, let's do this cover, or if it was me, but one of us started it. We had been pretty close because we were both into post-punk and noise, and wanted to make something. We liked heavy stuff, and we wanted to make something that was really pretty heavy, I guess. And so the idea was we would cover Shit Beer by Cows.
Right.
And I had never sang before, and I didn't know how to play guitar at this stage. I was
like, you had the ideas, but you didn't have the lexicon of how to do it.
Right, exactly.
The acumen. You had the ideas without the acumen. Yeah.
Right. I didn't have any of that, and so it was like all building inside of me, and I was like, I desperately want to do this, but I don't know how to do it. And so there was this like little opportunity, and I was like, well, I'll give it a shot and see what happens. And what's really funny is I recorded the vocals to this cover because Jake had laid down all the instruments and sent it to me, and it was beyond pummeling.
And let's also just let's set the table here a little bit. This is 2011.
This was 2010.
Okay, so when you talk about sending stuff, because you do not live in not only the same city, the same state, the same country.
We don't even live in the same country yet.
And the tools and materials to do that are easier now. Like, there's more tools to do that, where at the time I feel like it was like
we were doing it really pretty basic. Jake sent me a full wave file of the instrumental arrangement, and I had to just dub vocals over it the best way I could.
Right.
And all I had was a laptop.
Yeah, you didn't have like studio gear or anything, right?
I didn't even have a microphone. And
it's usually a good investment when you're singing, by the way.
Yeah. Usually a good investment. Yeah. But this shows you how green I was.
Right. You're new to it. It doesn't. You're not given a
manual.
A manual when you walk in the door. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. So I recorded.
So you want to be in a band, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. You want to be in a band. Here you go. And then you're sort of like, oh, I can be through this. And be like,
okay.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. No, it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. But what was funny was I recorded the vocals for that cover, the first thing I ever did, in the back of a car in summer in a church parking lot, because that was the place. I figured awesome. I could do it without freaking anybody out, because it was going to be like screaming vocals, and I was like, do it in a church parking lot. Nobody's gonna think about this.
Wow. Was it like when the service was going on?
It was like a Wednesday, so okay. I don't know if anybody was. I don't know if anybody was in. It was a very deserted parking lot. I was like, okay, cool. And then I went and I did it and sent it back to Jake. And Jake was like, I had no idea you could scream like that. And I was sort of like, I didn't either. I just felt like I had to do it. And so then we did it, and we, put it all together, and we posted it, and it got a really nice response. People seemed to really enjoy it, and they were like, wow, that dude is screaming really hard. Oh my God, it sounds like, the guitars and the bass sounds like robots eating each other or something.
Right, sure. Yeah.
Just the type of stuff people would say on the internet. And then, so we were taught, so after that, it was sort of emboldening. I was like, ooh, maybe, I could do this. And then I said, do you want to try and, I said to Jake, I remember, do you want to try and do like an EP of some of these covers and stuff? And he's like, why don't we just write our own shit? And I was like, okay. Because I didn't have the confidence to say, let's just write our own shit, because I hadn't really been doing it. I had bought a guitar in 2006, but I didn't really know how to play it. And I was like just very much learning as I went on. And so Pink City came together because of this sort of chance. And then we started sending files back and forth and just like trying to make a record. And I'd never done it before.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was a real learning experience, and it was really private, because this is the record we made as Pink City was called Designing
Women.
Yeah. And that was not a reference to the Delta-Berg
No.
A lot of people asked about that. And
I think it's understandable.
Yeah, it is. And just like the name Pink City related in a sort of abstract way to what the content was about, Designing Women related in an abstract way to what the content was about. I thought that I called it Designing Women because I thought that society puts so many roles on women that they don't want to necessarily have, or have just been, designed and nobody even thinks about it. And it just struck me as so strange and like so controlling. And it doesn't have anything to do with what the record is about necessarily, but the theme of being controlled and that sort of like outside forces controlling you was something that was really important to me at the time. And a lot of the record was, that first record we ever made was about me finding myself and my footing. For me personally, I don't know what it was about for Jake. I think it was about, let's just make a cool record.
Right.
But like I wrote, the thing about that record that I'm still really proud of was that we managed to make a cohesive statement from us just recording it. We were literally sending each other files over the ocean.
Yeah.
And, to have this thing that we sort of put together over a period of months and then put it out, we felt like it just felt like a really, when making that first record, I was just sort of like, I'm actually doing this stuff now that I've always wanted to do in some ways. And so it felt liberating, as well as I was really secretive about it in some ways, because it was very, emotionally, a lot of the music I've made has come from me mining some fairly dark places. And so,
sure, yeah.
And I mean, that record was a very dark record. And so
it's pretty intense. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially for a first record.
Yeah. Well, there's that too. Yeah. Just like,
yeah.
Out of the gate. Here we are.
Yeah. Out of the gate. It was sort of like, oh, okay. Now it sounds like somebody, bashing on a guitar with metal files while somebody's, screaming about something really insane, but yeah, making that first Pink City record was a real learning experience. And it's something I'm still pretty proud of for the most part. There are one or two songs that I wrote that I'm not as happy with on that record, but for the most part, I really enjoyed. I really love that record still, because it was all new to me and I was really learning things, and it still sounds pretty intense.
It does. And there was a thing I remember, like you didn't include the lyrics, but like you could like write the band to get the lyrics.
Wow, I have not. I did not remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another. Wow, I did not remember that at all.
Yeah.
That
struck me as, I was like, oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that was another like sort of protecting myself thing.
Right.
Because it was, I mean, it's not like it was a record that was about like, eating babies or something, but like it was a dark and it was an intense record, and I was sort of like trying to protect myself almost by doing it that way. And I mean, and a lot of things that I think of back then, I was just so green. I did not know this first thing about how to do any of this music stuff at all. And I was learning in real time. I was growing up in public the whole time.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing to sort of consider, is that I started making this music and started working on it, and I just hit the ground running as fast as I could, and I didn't really want to stop because I was starting so late. I was 24 when that first Pink City record came out.
And it's basically your first band.
It is my first band.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still talk to Jake a fair amount. We still talk a lot, and he's doing fantastically with Sugar Horse, and I feel great about that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I didn't know the first thing, and I was working. I was really just trying to make something good, while just like, learning how to do it in real time. So the stuff I contributed to that record was like what I could do with the little equipment I had at the time. I didn't really want to spend money. Like, all the vocals on the Pink City record were recorded through a laptop internal mic. And
yeah, that's crazy to me. I
yeah,
it's like, wow, okay.
Yeah, I actually did it deliberately like that because I had a freeware recording program called Audacity, and I would deliberately turn up the internal mic on the laptop as high as it could go, and so I would scream into it, and then it would be totally distorted.
Yeah.
And then I would use a reverb effect as like almost like a compressor
Right.
to like just like squash it all down and to make it like not only actually listenable, because listening to an unmixed distorted internal mic recording of somebody screaming is agonizing.
Yeah, I think they use that in Guantanamo Bay, right?
I think they probably do. And so I was using it like to sort of like as the most primitive way of distorting and mixing my vocals imaginable.
Right.
And then like
using the tools you have, right?
Using the tools I had.
Yeah.
And so and then that was basically we spent a few months making that Pink City record, sending it back and forth, and then we got it mixed and we released it on August 1st, 2011.
There you go. That's And then how did there was that split with Great Falls?
Yeah, we did a split with Great Falls.
Who are still around, still kicking.
They're still around. They're great. Yeah.
I think they just released something new, actually.
They did just release something new. I saw it and I was really happy about it.
Yeah.
We did that. That came out of nowhere. A guy named Anderson, who I still talk to occasionally as well. Shout out Anderson. Had liked that first Pink City record and had this little tape label called Tapes of the Neon God. And he said, "You want to do a split with this band called Great Falls?" And we were like, "Yeah." I mean, we were just amazed that anybody was going to ask about it, because we had definitely shopped the Pink City record around, and
sure. Yeah.
There were a couple labels we had talked to about it who did like it, but I think it was just we couldn't really tour at that time. And so
just logistically, I mean,
it seemed almost impossible.
How would you? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Jake lives in Wales and in the UK, and I live in Wisconsin. So how is that going to happen? And especially for someone who had no idea how to actually like be in a band. That's me. And because Jake had already had a couple of bands by that point, really good ones. And it just seemed logistically like a huge challenge to even think about going on tour for that record. And so,
well, especially for something that people don't know, right?
I mean, people would have. I mean, if we had been signed, they would have promoted it. But I think it was just every label we talked to were like, "Yeah, this is good, but we can't really do this because of we can't do this because of the touring thing." And we were like, "Okay." just like there's nothing we can do about that. So anyway, then we made that split. That split came around during a hard time in my life, and it was a little harder to make than the first one in some ways because just of what was going on in my life, and because I still am not very happy with the opening track, which was my song on that cassette, but I really like the final song. That was one of my songs. And then Jake's stuff on the split was amazing. And I really still think that's some of our craziest material. We worked on recording a second album in 2013.
Yeah, and you even did like a preview of one of the songs, I think, if I remember right.
We did 2 singles, and that record never got finished because basically I was having a lot of psychological difficulties at the time and wasn't really in a good place to finish it up. I don't know how. I had a cousin die in a pretty dramatic way in 2012, which was difficult, and there were other. I just had a period of mental difficulty around that time that made finishing that record really difficult. And in some ways, I'm glad we didn't finish it because the way we were working on it, it was like we were going to go pretty hard with it. And it was like, and nowadays, like, I'm not sure I could have gotten away with some of the stuff I was thinking about writing at times, but like, it was just because it was intense, and it was just like, I just feel terrible and I don't really know if I can finish this. And I didn't. I still have regrets about not finishing it, but it was a good record. And but I'm still really pleased with designing them. And I think that was
it's awesome. I mean, it does. It's intense. It does the thing it's supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me. So that's like what, 2014 or so, right? Somewhere around that neighborhood.
It ended really around 2013, but then in 2014 was when Coordinated Suicides started up. And Coordinated Suicides, first off, the name does have a story behind it.
It's a hell of a name.
It is a hell of a name. The name comes from this story I read about where there were prisoners in Guantanamo, and they had this plan of potentially coordinating their suicides so that the world would notice the plight that they were in. And the plan was foiled, of course. And so so it didn't really come to anything. But what grabbed me about that story was I thought, you can't even commit suicide by yourself in order to get the world to notice what's happening here. You have to you have to coordinate your suicides as part of a group. And to me, what was compelling about that was the idea of it stood out to me as a statement about emotional extremity, and it stood out to me as a statement of, almost it almost came from a place of sympathy in a way, and because it's this idea of, to me, Coordinated Suicides said, we are trying to make this extreme statement in order to say something to the world, in order to tell the world that something wild is happening and something is, emotionally upsetting, and something is really, something is making us suffer. And so that whole sort of idea was, to me, it was quite compelling artistically. And So that's why it was called that. And the band itself really came about because I wanted to start playing live. I had one show before that with Pink City at a festival, and I'd never performed before that. That was the first performance of my own music I ever did. And it was really, and it was a strange experience, but it was also a lot of fun. And I thought to myself, I'd really love to play guitar and sing in a band like I've always wanted to.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's how it started. And I spent a long time in Madison searching for people to play with. And then I eventually found 2 people, and we started performing live in 2014. And what was great about that band was when we were starting out, we had a place called The Vault that was like a DIY punk venue. And they booked us a lot. And so we could play a lot of shows in a
kind of get it in, get stuff in shape, try things out.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And I really love spaces like that can sort of be big enough for like little punk bands to sort of get their shit together in.
It's like a punk rock test kitchen or something. Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. I love DIY venues like that. And that to me was how Suicide sort of got off the ground and started running a bit, because I was still really, like, when that band started in 2014, I was a terrible guitar player.
Well, you're not coming in with years of experience. You're just coming in, like with the enthusiasm of a music fan, but again, without that acumen and skill of years of playing behind it. So it's going to take a while to catch up, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was just, and so then just Coordinated Suicide started up, and it became this thing that really took over and was a huge part of the music. It just became a big part of my life.
And you made the Life is Beautiful record.
Yeah.
And, that's Steve Austin mixed that one, right?
From Today's the Day, mixed it and mastered it. So the story behind the recording of that record is fun. We did it so before we did the record, the person who was playing drums at the time said he was probably going to leave the band after we did the record. And I thought, okay, all right, that's fine. And so we went down to Champaign-Urbana and did it in basically 2 days. I had a cold the whole time.
Horrible.
It was weird. And at one point we were recording and people came in off the street while we were recording. Nice. And I think that take did make it on the record. And
but they like, what the hell is happening in here?
I think they kind of were.
Like, what are you doing? What is this?
What is this? But they were nice about it. They were like, oh yeah, it's cool. And it was again a big learning experience, because that record is real rough and ready. And
it's a pretty raw sounding record.
It was a lot of it was recorded live. And there were like guitar overdubs and some small things, and then we did that, and then we finished it. And Steve, I had gotten into Today's the Day in 2014 or so, and the guy who was playing drums at the time, Dan, was really into Today is the Day. And so we just thought, well, why don't we get Steve to work on it? And Steve was great to work with. He, in my mind, his mix really helps that record a lot. Life is Beautiful. And
I mean, it could. There's a way that record just could be like Peace and Love, unlistenable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are times on that record where it sounds like roadkill, basically.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's like meant to be jarring almost, right?
It is. Yeah. It was absolutely. It was definitely meant to be jarring, and it just was like having him mixing it was great, and because it really helped give the record sort of a I feel like the mix on Life is Beautiful is interesting because it gives the record a perspective that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So I really enjoy it in terms of the mix. After and so then Coordinated Suicides was me and my bandmate. Coordinated Suicides from the beginning was me and my bandmate Chris on bass, and then we had a couple of different drummers, and then the second drummer who joined after the first record his name is Tim, and Tim is still the hardest hitting drummer I've ever met in my life. He would literally hit the drum set so hard in concerts with us that his drum set would like start falling apart between songs, and he'd have to like start setting it up between songs again.
Right.
It was intense. And then after that, I went on my first tour with Coordinated Suicides. We went on a 20-day tour of the East Coast, and then down to the South, and then up through the Midwest again with no days off. Mm-hmm. First tour I ever did. We all jumped in, and
you know what Mike Watt says: if you ain't playing, you're paying.
That's true. I mean, we all jumped into Chris's van, and we all just drove down to. We just started driving, and I still remember that tour as being just like either the best thing in the world or sort of like what is happening right now. You know how it is. And,
well, because that wasn't to set the table. You're kind of not. I mean, that's your first tour. And you're a grown man. You know
exactly. Yeah.
And obviously, not living in a vacuum, you had some frame of reference for what tour is, but there's nothing like to actually experience it. Also, the thing about touring is, and I say this often, you don't know if you're built for it or not until you do it.
Yeah, I had not thought about that at all. And I was definitely like, it was all new to me, and it was a huge learning experience. And I think the thing that I learned, one of the best things I learned early on about being in a band was that I couldn't, that I had to be very thoughtful about how I conducted myself with other people. Because if you go into a band and you just start fighting, it's like almost, it's like you're not in control of yourself. You have to think about how to, relate with everybody, how to learn how to be with people. And
you're presenting yourself as a group, and your actions and behavior reflects on that group.
Right. And so
in all you do.
Right. And especially
for better or for ill.
Exactly. And then between bandmates, it's almost like you have to learn how to get along with people in that sort of like band environment. And so I was doing all of that at the same time. And so, I mean, this is all just standard, everybody who's been in a band knows what this type of thing is like, but it was still like, just, again, it was like, I just hit the ground running and just had to sort of figure it out as I went along.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then after that tour, we ended up making an EP with Tim. And I think that was really when Coordinated Suicides started first finding itself as a band.
Right.
Because it was like, by that point, I had become a better guitar player. I think it would be obvious I'd been playing guitar a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, the act of doing it is going to accomplish that, right? I mean, hopefully, unless you're Johnny Ramone.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that would be kind of tough. And so then we did a little tour for that, and then for the EP, and then we got into this process of making the second Coordinated Suicides record. And the second Coordinated Suicides record took a really long time to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like literal years.
It took literal years to make. And the the reason why it took so long was, at least in part, a reaction. There were a lot of reasons why it took as long as it did, but one reason initially was I did want to take my time making the record.
Right.
I wanted very much to make an artistic statement with the record, and I wanted to take time with it because I felt like the first Suicides record had been rushed, and I didn't like being rushed in the studio. And I was like, I want to spend, a lot. I want to spend a good amount of time doing a really good record.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So we did go into it thinking that we would take some more time making it. But what happened was basically everybody's schedules became impossible to coordinate. And it was also a record that was about really difficult stuff. It was, the album is called This Could Be Heaven for a couple reasons. One is that it's like a statement saying, the world could be heaven if you would let it be, but you can't.
Right.
And so it ain't heaven. And this could be heaven. And I guess the sort of implied thing is, but it isn't. And then also, of course, This Could Be Heaven is a PIL reference, because that's a lyric that John Lydon sings in No Birds. That was sort of coincidental, but I did hear it one night and I thought, oh, that's a pretty interesting title, actually, especially because it's almost like a wistful title for a really punishing record. And to me, that is much more interesting than calling it, I mean, it's more
calling it some tough guy stuff or something.
Tough guy stuff, or gore, like grindhouse type things, like, we cut off your toes or something like that. It's like, it's not, it's more interesting to me to do something that is like, has these like hints of almost wistfulness and prettiness to it.
Right.
And to me, that's something I've always been very interested in. That sort of idea of mixing a sort of different perspective to heavier things. And so This Could Be Heaven was sort of like, the record was inspired by a period of time in my life, again, that had to do with mental difficulties and unhappiness. And but calling it This Could Be Heaven was almost as much like being hopeful in a weird way as it was being sort of like poisonous.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that shows through. It's definitely an intense record, but it's not like a uniform. It's not uniform in sound. But like there's a lot of. I mean, there's certainly a lot of emotion behind it. I mean, I threw it on the best of 2022.
I saw it. I was really complimented by that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's efforts do not equal results, but you could tell that like a lot of thought was put into it, to be sure.
Right. I mean,
it's a dense listen.
it is dense and it is demanding.
Yeah.
And I definitely know it's both of those things. But I really did not want to make, and the reason why I'm saying I didn't want to make it is because I really was, I was like really thought hard about that record in particular a lot.
For a while too. You had a whole pandemic to to think about
it
too.
Yeah, that was a whole other thing. Like we spent like 3 years making the record, and it wasn't like we were doing it like all 3 years. There was a lot of, it was like there there were a lot of infrequent but intense sessions. Like this, there was like a lot of gaps in time between the sessions that we did for that record. But I was thinking about it the whole time.
Right. Well,
So,
even when you're not actively working on it, it's on your mind. You're
constantly.
Yeah. You've
Yeah.
got thoughts about it.
Right. I mean, you know how it is when you've made a record. You probably spend, in the back of your head, you're always thinking about the record.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
it doesn't stop. You almost want to think about different things, but it's like that record is always going to be there in the back of your head until you finish that thing.
Right now, the thing, not for the one that's coming out in fall, but the one that is going to be next year is like, is it done or does it need something else? And if it needs something else, what is that? And then I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, how do we even answer that question? Because I don't know. It's not even finished mixed
impossible
yet.
To say. You can never know until you get to. I think the thing that helped me with finally committing to finishing that record was knowing that at a certain point I really did have to let go of it, because
you have to. Yeah, absolutely.
And I am really proud that I finished that Suicides record, because I did not want it to turn into another thing of like, there's this,
the Chinese democracy of noise rock.
Yeah, exactly. I also didn't want it to be another Pink City thing of like having this second record that is
just
hanging over
languishes
my head
and never
we never finished.
Yeah.
And,
I think it's the best representation of the band for sure. I mean, like I think I think that first record is good, but like I think that what that band is very well represented by that record in all its many moods.
Yeah, I mean, I really spent a lot of time. One of the ways I found like that was really easy for me to understand making a record, like when I was starting out trying to learn how to do it, was sequencing. Like I am really into sequencing of records.
Yeah, it shows too. Like it shows that there's like a lot of thought behind it.
Yeah, because to me, sequencing is a huge part of making an album, and I agree. I'm an album guy.
As well.
Yeah, it's very much like, to me, it's almost like writing a book. You're like, you start off with this chapter, then you have all these chapters in the book, which are the songs, and then you end the book with like whatever you're ending the song with. And it's really important to me to take the listener on a journey. And what I wanted to do with This Could Be Heaven was sort of demonstrate like taking the listener on a journey of what it is like to live with what it is like to function in the midst of a mental health crisis. That's what that record is about, is functioning in the midst of a mental health crisis. It starts off with coughs, which is like sort of the inception of the, oh my God, something's really wrong here. Yeah. And then it progresses from that to Frankie's Chrysalis, which is the fourth song on the record. And Frankie's Chrysalis was named that because my middle name is Francis, and I played a clarinet recital in 5th grade called Chrysalis. So Frankie's Chrysalis is sort of like a weird reference of, and to me, it's sort of what the record is about in a way, because the chorus of that song, which is one of the only songs that has chorus on that record, exactly. The chorus is, you can live your own life, don't ever be afraid. And that's that was a way. And then of course the idea is the record is, the whole rest of the record is saying, no, you should actually be really afraid. And so there was a lot of there are a lot of personal meanings within that record for me. And it was it was also meant to sort of end in a place that was like nothing to me is as rote as making a really intense record that's just really intense all the way through. Like if you don't put in breathing room,
it's exhausting.
Well, it's exhausting, and it's also just one thing. It's like getting. It's like, okay, I've been hit between the eyes like 5 times.
It stops being special. Like it's
right.
For me, anyway. Like, I mean, for some people, they just, I guess that's what they like. They like the one thing. All right, great.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of records that are great that way. Like, I listen to
it can be done. It can be done, but
of course, I mean, there's so many hardcore records there. It's just like,
right.
We're gonna kick your ass for 20 minutes, and that's it, and that's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I wanted to try and do something that was a little, like, had a lot of different, like, moods, and I wanted to do something that was really hard to predict. And I felt like I got pretty close with that record to saying pretty much what I really wanted to say.
Well, why do we do this? Yeah, so like I feel like because you are very thoughtful about this, and because it is very much presented as a record, which definitely came across from my perspective. Why don't we do a song by song on it?
Of coordinated suicides?
Yeah, I still want to talk about Caryatids, and we can, and we will. But let's just, because we're kind of doing it anyway. So since we're talking about it, there's not going to really be a better time to go.
Sure.
So let's just go in. So again, you mentioned Coughs is the first song, right?
Right.
So just tell me anything about that, lyrically, recording wise, mixing wise. And where the title came from, any of that kind of stuff.
I called it Coughs, I think, because
I'll throw it up on the screen for the YouTube people.
Yeah. Hi, YouTube. I called it Coughs because I think I started writing it on a Christmas day at one point, and I think I had had a cold, and so it was. I called it Coughs almost as like a joke.
Sure.
And but then Coughs was the first song I wrote for the record, and I knew I wanted it to be like the opening track. And
because when you're thinking about, again, when you're talking about sequencing, opening tracks are very important.
Right, and I wanted to make an opening track that was fast, that would really grab people. Right. And so when I was writing it, I just sort of thought, it just seemed like immediately like this is where the record is going to start. That was always going to be the opening track. And I also then the reason why the first 3 songs on the record are like that is because I almost wanted to show to the listener that we can do this sort of like really, immediate drop D type of, crunch riffing type stuff.
The crunchy heaviness. Yeah.
Right. And then I wanted to like run them all like without a break so that nobody could. I wanted to run them all without a break so that like it was almost be like, whoa, okay, that's really intense. And then like at the end of You Could Smile, it has that segue where the tape that we do with fake tape slow down.
Right. Yeah.
And I wanted it to sort of like smack people in the face and be like, is the record malfunctioning?
Yeah, like what's happening here? Yeah.
Right. And because then
did they check this test pressing?
Yeah, exactly. And then it would like slow down and be like, oh, whoa. And it would like disorient the listener.
Yeah.
And then it would like sort of start up with Frankie's Chrysalis, which is sort of like the, okay, you got through these 3 songs. Okay, here's what the record is really about. Right. And because like, it's like, to me, those first 3 songs on This Could Be Heaven are like an extended scene setting.
It's like a suite almost.
It is. Yeah. And it's just like, I wanted it to be really immediate and like hit you really hard. And then it would start getting weird. and because the record gets really weird after that.
It does. So what about Mickey Disney Lover? Let's go through each one of these.
Disney Lover. That title, I still don't remember how I came up with it, but I just thought it was hilarious. I just thought it was such a funny phrase.
Yeah.
Because it is a ridiculous phrase.
It is a ridiculous phrase. Yeah.
And like, I just thought it would be really funny. I guess this is my sense of humor is a little weird, but I thought it would be really funny to have this like really pummeling song with a title like that. And I remember being really happy with like the for one thing, Chris plays bass so well on the whole record.
His playing's great. Yeah.
And like one thing I really love about that song is how just like one thing I thought a lot about with Coordinated Suicides when I was starting it out was that I wanted the guitar and the bass to be battling each other a lot.
Right. Like almost at Discord.
Yeah, almost like they're trying, almost like the guitar and the bass are like trying to gain control over the music, but I didn't want any one instrument to win necessarily.
A clear winner, yeah.
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 And one way that Mickey Disney Lover demonstrates that is the like sort of like little bridge breakdown.
Yeah.
Where it gets really melodic. Like Chris does this sort of like melodic run in the middle, and then I do this like sort of high pitched stuff. And like musically, that was something I really enjoyed. And then You Could Smile was like, I remember that Tim, who was playing drums in Suicides at the time when we wrote that, called it the Rush song because the intro, he was like, the intro to this is like YYZ.
Right.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that. Like is the thing I wrote. It's like I was like, oh, that's kind of hilarious. We didn't try and do that, but that's really funny. And
proggy business.
I think there's always been a little like bit of like prog for idiots in the background of some of my music. Like it's like this would be prog if I had the chops to do it. But yeah, that like those opening tracks, like I wanted it to be very like disorienting almost and sort
daunting,
and then when you get to Frankie's Chrysalis, it's like, okay, here's the real stuff. And Frankie's Chrysalis was musically, Frankie's Chrysalis, a lot of the songs on this record, on the Coordinated Suicides record in particular, were written with a lot of alternate tunings. Nothing is standard on the record.
Right.
And that song in particular, I wrote with a tuning I made up. And I was trying to do a... Is
that a trade secret, or can you reveal what
No,
that was?
I'll reveal it. It was D, A, E flat, A, B, D.
Oh, okay.
So it's almost like backwards Dagad.
Yeah.
It has like... What's really fun about that tuning is that there are tons of discords available to you because there's like those two deliberately clashing notes. There's, the A, and then there's the D, and raising it up to an E flat is like, would make it just incredibly discordant. So you can just do a straight, drop D bar chord, and it'll be incredibly discordant, like.
Yeah, it's gonna have all kind of weird overtones and stuff. Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Weirdly, where a lot of the alternate tuning stuff came from, because it became a huge part of the noisier stuff I was making. A lot of that came from like Nick Drake, and I mean, as much it also came from Sonic Youth, but a lot of it came from Nick Drake because Nick Drake would do so many bizarro alternate tunings. And I think an important thing to realize about all of my music is that at heart it is coming from sort of a singer-songwriter perspective.
Right.
And
even was presenting more as like, this raucous band presentation.
Exactly. And So that sort of outlook is present underneath all of the distortion and the screaming and the hammering drums, and very deliberately so, because it's really crafted like it's really crafted sort of like a singer-songwriter record to me underneath it all. And I feel like all of my records have that sort of viewpoint to them underneath them in some ways. And so that's sort of where it came from. But with anyway, to go back to I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling.
Derivations are welcome. That's fine.
Yeah. So going to Frankie's Chrysalis again, I was trying to write sort of a song where it was had that sort of alternate tuning, shoegaze meets noise rock type thing of it. I was like very deliberately trying to mix prettier parts with really discordant parts and to have it make sense as a whole. I really wanted to do that because to me that sort of balance between happier things and not so happy things is really very reflective of life. And I mean, life, a truly heavy song to me is not always just, getting your ass kicked against a far wall. I mean, that's part of it. But, you might also think, wow, the sun looks really nice, before that. Yeah. So you might want to put in the, wow, the sun looks really nice before the, oh my God, I'm getting my ass kicked part, because that's just more of a representation of what life is like. Because it's not all bad and it's certainly not all good. And to have that sort of tension is really more accurate to, at least to me, what life is actually like. And so to have that as sort of being the key to the record as the one that is that has the pretty parts as well as the discordant parts was conceptually, to me, that was really important. Then the next song is Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
Mary Magdalene was the last song written for the record.
Okay.
And I knew I needed something to bridge. And I was thinking about this for a while. I didn't know how to bridge Frankie's Chrysalis and Like Shining Flies in the track list. And I was like, how do I do this? And I was wrong. This song is in standard. And the songs where it's just me alone, Mary Magdalene and Hymnal, those songs are in standard too.
But the other ones are not the ones with it.
The other ones are not. And Mary Magdalene, I wrote deliberately as almost like a segue.
Right.
But I also wanted it to sort of work as a song. And so I deliberately wrote this sort of very short song that was almost like another explanation of it lyrically, because it's sort of like, I think the lyrics are, with all the things you're mastering, you can't hide the suffering. I'm a shadow. His mother knows his name. And it was sort of like, Mary Magdalene was sort of like a weird, distanced commentary about what being a performer is like. Because you're sitting out there on a stage or in a recording studio, and you're pouring your heart out as explicitly or as obscurely as you want, and you have no idea what you're displaying, really. Nobody really knows what they look like when they're performing.
Sure.
And I mean, for me, I've always dealt with that by just not caring, and just, it is what it is. And if it's strange, yeah, it's pretty strange, I guess. If it's, if it's pretty, I'm glad you think it's pretty. If it's really heavy, yeah, it's pretty heavy. But it's all that thing of, you really don't know how it's coming across or what you're displaying to the world. And the last line of that song is, I guess I'll never know what they can see. And that's sort of a reference to, I don't know what a crowd, when I'm performing for them, is seeing. I don't know what I'm displaying to them. I don't know what the person listening is thinking of this. And that scares me. It really scares me. But I also, this is my life. This is just what it is. And then, like Shining Flies after that was one of the earlier songs on the record. That was written as like a very much like I wanted to write the most ass-kicking song I could. And so
it's time and a place for that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I thought it would be really interesting to sort of, and what helped was after putting Mary Magdalene there, I was like, oh, I've got like the really like weird interlude, unsettling thing. Musically, it was inspired by Syd Barrett, and Mary Magdalene was. It was inspired by Syd Barrett and Sly Stone, if you can believe that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's a very late Sly Stone recording called Sylvester, which is 42 seconds long.
Yeah.
And it's just him and an organ and a drum machine, and he's almost singing about himself. And it's one of the most haunting things I've ever heard. And
wow,
Mary Magdalene was actually like spiritually, I thought, something. To me, it was almost like trying to make that type of statement of looking back at yourself and casting a cold eye.
That reflection, yeah.
Yeah, and so Shining Flies was basically like an attempt to write the most ass-kicking song I possibly could. And so there was like a bunch of really there were a lot of pummeling parts, and then there was a big like sort of there is a chorus in that song, and then there was the big anthemic thing near the end, and I just sort of was trying to put in as many parts as possible, just that while still making sense and not having it just be like a bunch of different parts.
Right. This part for part's sake.
Right. which can sometimes happen in metal, you know, like where they have like these incredibly complicated parts that are awesome and they kick ass, but you also think, is this really
why is
like
this here? Yeah, who is this for?
Right. And that can sometimes be annoying. And so like I mean, on one hand, it's not like I am a metal guitarist. I don't have that type of technique, but I was also trying to write with like a lot of different sections and sort of make sure that it all made sense from a songwriting standpoint. Then the next song is Sarcoma.
Right.
Sarcoma is a really intense song. And on this song,
I think that was like one of the first ones that was.
It was one of the first songs that was. It was one of the first songs that was released.
Yeah.
JB, aka Jonathan Brown, aka live drummer of Conan, Neutron, and the Secret Friends.
Yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah.
And, aka one of the most talented musicians I've ever met in my
he's
life.
Fantastic. Yeah, great.
He's unbelievable. I mean, I think, you know, JB is like one of the best drummers anywhere.
World-class drummer for sure.
Yeah. And
I'm biased, of course, but yes.
So am I. He's wonderful. And so he plays amazing drums on Sarcoma. He also plays amazing drums on Frankie's Chrysalis. Yeah. JB joined the band after we had made about half the record with Tim. Right. And then Tim moved to Minnesota and moved to Minneapolis. And we just asked JB, like, would you be interested in like playing? And he's like, yeah, just send me the songs. I'll have them done in a week. And I was like, yep, that sounds about like what I would expect from JB. And then we did it and it was great. And, you know, playing with JB is just such a privilege. And like it's
well, he really cuts loose too in a way that you can. He's serving the song, but he's doing some pretty kind of cool stuff. That's like,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean his sense of musical judgment is unimpeachable,
Yeah.
and so he plays amazing drums on Sarcoma, and Sarcoma was one of the first songs we sort of released from the record. We had done a little single of Frankie's Chrysalis,
Right.
a couple years before the record actually ended up coming out.
So much so that I was like, oh, did they re-record that? And I was like, oh no, it's just
No,
taking this long
it
for this
was-
record to come out.
It just took that long for the record to come out, and
I was like, Jesus,
it was
that's a long
insane.
time.
It was really tough to get the record put out.
Yeah.
But we Sarcoma is about that dramatic death of my cousin in 2012 that I alluded to. At least in part it is. And it was a difficult thing to deal with. And the song is about a mix of sort of nightmare scenarios in the first verse that were actually inspired by Shirley Jackson's The Lottery.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I love that story.
Yeah,
It's an
the
all-timer. Yeah.
the first verse is like of that song, which is sort of like it's helpful to talk about this anyway, because it's like it's a good explanation of like the sort of lyrical approach I take. I wrote the first verse of Sarcoma as almost like a weird sort of retelling of The Lottery, which I did it because I thought it was sort of symbolic. It felt like I was taking a lot of it felt like a lot of people were throwing stones at. It felt like I was throwing stones at myself mentally,
Right.
and so I was. I thought I was thinking of it in those terms. And then the second verse of Sarcoma is sort of a coded telling about what happened. My cousin died from cancer in like 6 weeks. It was really weird.
It's heavy.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's a heavy song. And so it was just like trying to get rid of those feelings and the sort of like weirdness it felt. It was all like it just felt really strange to deal with that. And so it was like writing about that felt pretty good. And I think it worked out because I think it's one of the best songs we've ever done. And is the Metamorphosis the next one?
Metamorphosis is the next
Yes.
one. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That one I'm proud of because I can't remember the exact tuning of it. I know that I have it written down somewhere.
Sure.
But I put a screwdriver under the strings for that song, and it's in a weird tuning. And so it's like a Sonic Youth song in that way. I mean, it's like it's a total prepared guitar song. That's why it sounds weird. And
that's such it's such a hilarious term, but I know
prepared
that is the term.
guitar.
Prepared guitar, yeah.
It's
as opposed
really
to the
funny.
unprepared guitar, which is everyone else. Okay.
Right. It's sort of the what? We're chopped liver here?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it's hilarious.
It always cracks me up.
It's really funny. And so then that song, one thing I'm really proud of, in the bridge of that song, we recorded me playing a message I got from an automated service that was telling me I had a therapy appointment coming up.
Right, yeah.
And so in the bridge, there's a recording of, you'll hear this voice saying something for Michael at, such and such and such. And it's all, in the mix of,
yeah, it's just kind of
it's all buried in the mix, but
Yeah.
you can actually hear this voice. And that's just me taking my cell phone and playing it through my guitar pickups and just recording it as part of the bridge of that song. I've always liked that song because of it being, an experiment that worked.
Yeah, I know. It sounds cool.
Yeah.
It works.
I like that one. And then what's the next one?
Victorian Gift is the next one.
Ooh, that song is intense. That is still probably one of my favorite riffs I've ever written. Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do. That song is tuned in BAD GBE, which is everything in standard except for the low string, which is tuned down to B.
Ah, got it. Yeah, there's someone that uses that tuning.
Yeah, that's Today's the Day tuning.
Oh, okay, that's there
yeah.
You go.
And I and also Soundgarden uses it for Rusty Cage.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So so both of those people use that tuning, and one thing I thought that was really interesting about using that tuning when I started experimenting with it, I was like, this is the sludgiest tuning in the world, and it's really counterintuitive. And so a lot of the really sludgy songs on the album have that tuning, because I thought this is just a really cool, like, weird tuning to get like really slow and punishing with. And I didn't feel like a lot of people had been using it for that, weirdly enough. And
interesting, yeah.
So I wrote Victorian Gift as almost like a weird version of a Cherub song.
Okay. I can hear
and
that,
wanted it to be really like have that sort of, and that's another influence on my style, is that thing that Cherubs did of interspersing really heavy, punishing parts with these like really catchy melodic parts.
Yeah,
was something I really was into. And like the little weird undercover pop smarts that Cherubs have was something that I glommed onto.
Well, there's almost like a secret hook where you're like, oh yeah, that's actually
right.
catchy.
Yeah, and like to me, that's sort of, I'm trying to write the secret hook all the time.
Yeah,
and so like one of those things where it's like you listen to it and it might not be obvious on the first or the fourth listen, but on the fifth listen you'll hear it.
Well, because it's and I think a lot of records are this way, but
right.
Like, it rewards multiple listens, right? Because if you're,
well, I mean, I think if you're serious, you want to try and make sure it rewards multiple listens. Yeah, and like I really, and again, we spent a lot of time on this record, so I really wanted it to be. I really wanted it to sort of have depth, like something you could revisit over time. It is definitely a record that is like sort of immediate, but right. also plainly has a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. And it's almost a little confusing to hear the record at first, because they're sort of like, what is happening here? And right. then
it's like sensory overload almost. Yeah,
and very deliberately so. And because living with mental health difficulties is sensory overload.
Yeah,
that's what it's like. And if you're going to make a record about it, it should be like hard to process, because living with it is hard to process.
Yeah,
and so musically, that was what Victorian Gift was about, was trying to write this really heavy but like still kind of catchy thing. And I remember this very clearly. I brought in the riff to Chris and Tim at the time, in the practice space we were in at the time, and they were like, so okay, can you play the song? And I did start playing the song. And as soon as I got to the bridge, I completely forgot what I'd written the night before, and I just jammed out a new bridge right then and there, and that became the new bridge for the song permanently.
Right.
So it was like one of those things where I was like, oh, it worked out. This is great.
Yeah.
So,
fantastic. It's
yeah.
It's a success story. And success story. Yeah.
We did it. Yeah. Then Permanence. This Permanence, right?
Permanence is next. Yeah. You got it.
Permanence was. I'm actually the only person playing on Permanence. That's an entire solo. That's like a real solo recording. I did it that way because the arrangement was really difficult to explain. And I really wanted this like sort of weird artsy song on the record that was not going to be even more than the other stuff on the record was not going to be especially easy to parse.
Right.
The vocal effects were inspired by Throbbing Gristle.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the song itself was... I was trying to do a Perubu thing.
Okay.
Which it doesn't sound like that on the recording at all. I don't think you would think that it sounded like Perubu.
Right.
But it's like I was trying to convey that sort of like, you know how Perubu conveys this sort of vast emptiness at their best?
Sure. Yeah.
Where they have this feeling of like almost like noirish, like you're in a dark alleyway somewhere and everything is like incredibly confusing and strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
That feeling was what I was trying to get at with Permanence musically. And that one is in a really strange tuning that I can't remember, but it's is written down someplace.
Right. As long as you can.
You have to write down all of the weird tunings every time, otherwise you'll never remember anything.
Respect. I can't. It's a lot.
It is a lot, but it's also like
it's your vision, you know.
If that's where you are, then you just, it's not that. I mean, you're turning the tuning knobs. It's not that much, but it is annoying on stage.
Yes.
That is so annoying when you're like trying to cover dead spaces by tuning.
Yeah.
And so the way I did it live was I'd usually just set a digital delay pedal to self-oscillate, and it would just go while I tuned up, and then I was like, okay, like here's the song, and then you've got some noises. Noise.
Yeah, exactly. it's a joiner noise.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a joining noise segue, and then the garden is.
The garden is what is next. I was about to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, is that I was trying to. That's
the longest song on the record.
It is. It's also the oldest song on the record, because it was originally going to be a Pink City song. And,
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it came from. The Garden actually was a song that I wanted to do on the second Pink City record.
Got it.
And I never finished it. And it was written in standard tuning when I did it. But it was already in A. So I tuned the lowest string to A. And then kept everything else in standard. And then I ended up heavily rewriting the song for this record. And it's interesting for me to think about how different it was when it eventually got recorded, because the lyrics were totally different. Really the only thing that carried over from the early version was that main riff of, bow, 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 and then bow, 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 bow. That was the thing that was originally like a lot of what that song was about for Pink City. But I had held on to it for a long time. I thought it was a good riff, and I thought to myself, well, I do have a huge back catalog because I'm always writing. Right. That's something about me, is that like I'm always like trying to generate ideas, and I also have what that means is that I have a pretty large back catalog of stuff.
Right.
And so with that, I tried to make this thing that was like super. I wanted to make like a really big ending, like here is what it sounds like, when all of the towers and all the buildings are falling down. Moment.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are a couple of like concept albums that have that kind of song at the end, where it's like this huge thing, like on the Downward Spiral by 9 Inch Nails. The Downward Spiral is the song of like everything is the actual song where it's like, oh yeah, everything is falling apart here, and then you end with and then it ends with like a weird like sort of rueful note like hurt, and that brings me to Hymnal, which was sort of intended. It wasn't. I was definitely not trying to write hurt at all, but it was trying. It was like it meant to serve that same sort of role as that sort of like rueful, ambiguous ending knowledge of. You ever hear that phrase, the truth will set you free, but not until it's finished with you?
Oh, no, I like that tag, though. That's good.
Yeah. It's something I saw at a gas station once, and I thought to myself,
wow, okay.
That's pretty philosophical gas station.
Yeah. I was gonna say for a gas station,
yeah,
pretty good.
Yeah, and I was like, I thought, that's pretty good. And like, so to me, Hymnal serves that function of being the last song on the record that is like not a happy ending, but not necessarily like as bad as it could be, more just ambiguous and cold, and the sort of idea of, and this is where it ends up.
Right.
You don't, because when you live with mental health crisis, a lot of times, you end at a certain place of, okay, because you almost tire yourself out.
Yeah.
And because you're dealing with that sort of feeling of depression of, it feels terrible, and then you get to a point where you think, well, I'm too tired for it to feel as terrible as it does. And the song sort of that was also sort of a Syd Barrett thing, that song, and was sort of inspired by that feeling of reporting on your life from a distance,
right?
And sort of you sort of it's almost like saying, this mental crisis happened, it was unfortunate, and it's not something you get over, it's something you get through. And that's sort of like the message of that song at the end, is that like thing of, sometimes you don't get over stuff, you just get through it. And then getting through it, you'll get over. And so that's really what it's about. There
you go. So that's This Could Be Heaven, which
is a real heavy record.
Heavy record, yeah.
That the cover is the cover was designed by the Madison musician Graham Hunt,
nice.
Who's incredibly talented. And the photograph on the cover is an old photograph that belongs to me of of property near a house where I grew up when I was a kid in Michigan. And so I found that old photo, and I thought it had a lot of personal significance. And then if you look in the clouds there, you can see that Graham photoshopped the eyes of Ivan the Terrible from the painting by Ilya Repin, the Russian painter.
Oh, wow. Okay, hold on. Let's see if I can...
And
I could probably zoom in a little bit. Like we also probably don't need to see my Bandcamp cart, which is those are all recommendations from Tim Green, by the way. That I forgot that like it doesn't carry over to the other computer, so I always forget about it until I'm doing the show.
That's
hilarious. I can see it now.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I'll buy those eventually.
Right. So if you can see him in the. If you can see him in the top like that, in the clouds, there are the eyes of Ivan the Terrible.
Funny. Okay, I did not notice that before. Okay.
Yeah, I deliberately, I really wanted that in there as sort of like a commentary on like sort of like the sadness underneath suburbia.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. No.
So, it had a lot of like everything else about this record, it had a lot of personal significance to me. So I'm really happy with how that cover design came out. I really enjoyed it.
So, is Coordinated Suicides like finished at this point?
I can't see us making a third record, but at the same time, everybody still gets along, and there is going to be. I think there are going to be a couple performances. I know there's one for sure coming up. We're actually performing in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in September, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And Caryatids, my newer band, is going to be performing there too, and that's a wonderful segue.
Yeah, I was gonna say the one band we haven't talked about, which
well, there's also my solo career too.
True, but
yeah,
let's
do Caryatids.
Let's do Caryatids. That's relevant. I just saw you guys play actually with Porcelain.
Oh man, what a great band!
Yeah,
Porcelain was fantastic. And also a shout out to Super Thief, who were
they were great.
They're who have a member in Porcelain.
Jordan's from Super Thief is in Porcelain, and Steve Pike from Exhalants and Carl Sagan's Skate Shoes.
Yeah,
Carl
he was in Carl Sagan's Skate Shoes too.
Yeah.
I'll be damned. I think I must have. I probably knew that, but it was something that I think I forgot about because I mean, so many people are in so many different bands. But like, and
it's also like I think I heard the name a long time before I ever actually listened to that band. I was like, oh, that's a good band name, and then I didn't think about it at all.
I think that
I did the same thing with Exhalants. I totally did not listen to the first record at all, and then I heard the second record. I'm like, oh yeah, this band's great. And
I actually heard Exhalants. I heard Exhalants on tour recently, and I was like with Caryatids, and I was like, damn, this really rips. And then I was a huge Super Thief fan, and
Super Thief were great.
And Coordinated Suicides really wanted to play with Super Thief at one point, and I don't think it ever happened. Which is kind of hilarious. It is kind of a shame. We played with great bands though. I'll just say right now to shout out to some of them. We played with Animal Lover from Minneapolis. Fantastic band. So underrated.
Actually, they came up in conversation when I was talking to John. John from the band John. We were talking about Animal. I think it was John. No, maybe it was Tunic. Maybe it was David.
David's a huge Tunic fan. We also played a lot with Tunic. Coordinated Suicides did. David was a huge Animal Lover fan, as was I. And
likewise.
Staying Alive is still one of the to me is one of the most underrated noise rock records of the 10s because it's almost like jokes on noise rock only a true head would get, and which makes it kind of a hard
not jokey music though. At all.
It's really serious, and it was really well thought out. Also a really funny record, and as we all know, funny records are the hardest records to make. And I think it's so hard, and this is something I've actually thought about with myself, is that I would really love it if my work was funnier. I think that would be a really great thing. And because when you make records that are often pretty punishing, you can sometimes think am I just this is fun to make stuff that's heavy, but it's also am I just wallowing? Is this good for me?
Right.
And you almost have to wonder about it. And so I thought to myself, it would be really good if I made funnier records. And something I loved about that Animal Lover record was that it was a genuinely fun record.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, not everyone can pull it off. I mean, for every Sparks, there's a whole bunch of hokey BS that's that doesn't work at all.
Right.
I wish you weren't doing that.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough. And Toupee was also a great friend band of ours. Salvation, who's been interviewed on Protonic Reversal.
Yeah, Salvation's great.
We played with Salvation a bunch. We played with Den a lot from Chicago. They were great. We played with a lot of great bands. And it's funny because we never did end up playing with Super Thief, but in Caryatids, we ended up playing with Porcelain. So it's almost like it's almost like we end up playing with them anyway, just in different formats, different projects. And so Caryatids, anyway, to go to there.
Yeah, tell me about Caryatids.
Caryatids started in like 2018, which was right around when Suicide stopped playing live.
Right.
Suicide stopped playing live because everybody was really busy at the time, and we were still in the midst of making that record, and a lot of it was down to me to finish. So they were like, you need to finish the record, and then we'll start gigging after that. And I'm like, okay, I'll finish the record. And I did end up finishing the record. It took a lot of time because emotionally it was pretty tough for me, but I did it. And but then I started up Caryatids because I was like, playing this sludgy stuff I love it. I really love it. But it's also, I do wonder if this is all that great for me. And I also just wanted to do stuff that was different.
Yeah.
That wasn't just, I had this thing of, I've never wanted to be looked at as a musician who only ever did one thing.
Right.
I mean, that can work for musicians like really well. And because imagine being as good at one thing as the Ramones are at being the Ramones.
Sure. I mean, that sounds great. Yeah.
That would be the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But like, I couldn't be the Ramones like 24/7. And I can't be coordinated suicides 24/7.
Yeah.
That is agonizing. I've done it.
That doesn't sound like a good time at all. Yeah.
No, it hurts. It's painful. Yeah. And so I wanted to do a project that was, still dealing with different things, but wasn't so like, because like doing suicides all the time could be really like,
daunting.
It's daunting. It was really depressing, dark stuff. And like, so I wanted to make Caryatids almost like Caryatids is almost like a heavier, noisier, catchier, rocked up version of my solo stuff in some ways, or at least it was initially. And then then Caryatids grew into being like a real band where everybody is contributing. And so it started in 2018, and it initially had 5 people in the band, and there were going to be like 3 guitarists. I was going to be one of them. I really wanted to do a 3-guitar band. I still do. I think it's a great idea because I love 3-guitar arrangements.
If everyone's walking into it knowing that you have to like plan accordingly and you have to like split things up in certain ways and whatever, it can be really cool. But
right, and I don't think I knew that at all. I went into it. It was really like I'm not sure this is going to work with 3 guitars. So
yeah,
the original bassist ended up moving to Philadelphia. Shout out Ross. Ross is a wonderful person. And then one of the guitarists, whose name is Terrence, ended up playing bass. And Terrence is one of the best guitarists I've ever met in my life. Terrence is astonishing at playing guitar. And Terrence was like, I love playing bass as much as I love playing guitar. It's going to work out great. And I thought, oh, God.
I would never guess that that's his second instrument at all.
That is his second instrument.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He's unbelievably talented. And so then he started playing bass, and the first, within a minute, I was like, okay, I guess this worked out pretty well. And this is another funny story. The first Caryatids shows were going to be, were 3 out-of-town shows. I did it that way because I thought it would be really interesting to debut with a band playing out on the road instead of playing in town. And we did it with a band called, at that time, they were called Wash, and they later developed into a Madison band called Interlay. Really, really great in both forms. And so the funny thing is, we were rehearsing, and we did it. We were preparing for this tour, this little mini tour. With it was me, a second guitarist, and Terrence on bass, and someone else on drums. And day before the mini tour happened, the person who was playing drums at the time, wonderful person, great guy, said, "I gotta leave the band. I have a lot of shit happening in my personal life. It's too much. It's tough." And we were like, okay, that's understandable. What's going on? That's tough. And but then the second guitarist, we were lucky the second guitarist could play drums. And so we just looked at him and we're like, can you play drums so that we can do this tour?
Right.
And I mean, he knew how the songs went, so he could do it. But it was like we had to become a power trio the night before we did this.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah.
So
it was nuts.
That's a wild change up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to become the sole guitarist.
Yeah.
And I had to cover everything. And the punchline is these first shows we did as power trio, people were like really enjoyed it, and we're sort of like, that's the first time you've played out with this? And we were like, yeah. And I mean, it's not saying that much because we'd all been in bands at that point, and so it's not like, but it was still like a lot to pull to like completely redo all the arrangements like right before we had to go out on tour. And then we just were a power trio ever since then. And then the original drummer of Caryatids left, and then we got a drummer called Mike Polino. And Mike Polino is also and the original drummer is really talented. His name is Cal, really talented person. And Mike Polino is really talented. And we had been rehearsing with Mike Polino for like a couple months, and we're about to make our debut in March of 2020.
Right.
Didn't work out like that.
Yeah. How'd that work out?
They canceled the show.
Yeah, did something happen? Yeah, I'm not aware.
I don't know why things happened in March of 2020.
Yeah.
It was so that was like, okay, I guess we got this. And the funny thing is, we had been rehearsing so much that we just thought, why don't we make the first record?
Right.
And so we did in the middle of the pandemic. We were lucky enough that there was property. There was a space on Terrence's property that was big enough for us to socially distance while recording. So we all had our masks on. We were all 6 feet away from each other, and we recorded all the instrumental tracks of that record in like a concrete shed in our bassist's on our bassist's property. And I say that because you can listen to the tape and you wouldn't really know that.
Right.
It sounds it's one of the most hi-fi recordings I've ever been part of.
Yeah, it sounds really good. I mean, I would never guess that it was.
And we recorded all of the vocals for the record in a practice space in September of 2020. So there was like a little gap, but that's been by far the quickest turnaround time I've ever had with a record in some ways.
Right.
I mean, the Life is Beautiful record, that was a really fast turnaround because we had to get it all done in a certain amount of time.
Right.
But this was like, that was like just a normal turnaround time. And the way that Caryatids developed stylistically was like nothing I could have ever predicted.
That's a crazy, it sounds like the original vision of it was like completely different. like to a certain degree, right? At least instrumentation wise.
Instrumentation wise, it was different, but musically it wasn't. And it was like almost like it was musically, it almost was like it was taking its time to find itself musically.
Sure.
And then by the time we had made that first record, we really had started finding ourselves musically, I think. And
for me, it seems very rooted in the, that Wire, PIL, pop group, kind of like that sensibility, without necessarily being worshipful of that sound.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. It's certainly the most overtly post-punk project I've ever done.
Yeah.
And the thing that I find interesting when people talk about it is that they always like bring up like 90s references. Like they always, Oh yeah, no, they always compare us to like Modest Mouse and Mineral and things.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Well, everyone hears what they hear, I guess. But
I don't really hear it either. But like
Yeah.
to me, it sounds quite post-punk. But
yeah,
it also,
no, I thought that was pretty apparent, but
right. But I also think there's definitely like some 90s-ish stuff in there.
yeah.
But
I would think, if anything, I would think more like, I like Shudder to Think or something, at least musically. Where
that's interesting. No one has ever said Shudder to Think.
Yeah. If I was, but I wouldn't. I would have to be.
Right.
It'd be like, you could only name a '90s band to compare this to. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't, like, Modest Mouse is not where I would go to at all. Like, it doesn't present that way at all. But
Right.
I think that's also a fraught reference at this point. So
it could be, yeah. I think that it was like Modest Mouse we got compared to Sunny Day Real Estate once.
all right.
I think it's because I have a high-ish voice and am singing, and it's like sort of like alt rock-ish
Yeah.
at times.
Well, and Sunny Day Real Estate's got some jams, man.
Yeah.
Not a band that was afraid to rock out, but people don't think about that piece of it. It's like,
No, they don't think about that at all. And
Yeah.
so to me it was quite a compliment when somebody said that.
Sure.
And but yeah, like to me Caryatids is sort of like, it is the most overtly post-punk thing I've ever done, but also I think it's a mix of everything else that I'm bringing to it and that everybody else is bringing to it.
Sure.
So there's like a lot of there are a lot of different things that go into that band, and in some ways it's different. It's definitely different than any other band I've been in, because no other band I've been in jams this much. And no other band I've been in has this much of like this much interplay going on.
Yeah, because it's kind of coming together not from a singer songwriter like perspective first, right? Where it's composed and arranged.
Yeah, a lot of it is some of it is like that, but a lot of it is like especially with all the newer material, it's been all jam based.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of like sort of songwriting decisions, I think, that come from that place of it being a jam first and then like sort of organized into a song.
It's going to hit a little different, right? Of course it is. It's a different method of composition.
Different method of composition, different projects. So it's a very it goes all over the place stylistically.
Yeah.
And but in a way I think that is coherent. And I'm really excited about that band because I think it has it's definitely not like anything else I've ever done. And although you can also hear it,
right,
that you can hear that's related, but you can also hear it's not like anything else I've ever done. And in that, to me, is a sign that it's going in the right direction, because I think that if I'm being surprised with what
it's probably a good sign for the listener. Yeah,
it's probably a good sign for everybody else. So, yeah.
Well, man, it's been so great having you. I'm so glad we finally managed to pull it off.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a solo record as well, but
there is a solo record. Yeah.
If you want to speak briefly to that, at this point.
Sure. I made a solo record in 2014 that came out in 2017 called A Harvest of Ice, which was very much like that sort of singer-songwriter thing, which had a lot of like sort of psychedelic drone-y aspects to it.
Yeah.
And I'm making a second solo record right now.
Nice.
In addition to making the second Caryatids record right now. So
very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, pretty happy about it.
So last thing, man, why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because it gives my life meaning. Mm-hmm. And I do what I do because the high of performing is unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. I do it because songwriting is as much emotional release and coping method as it is something that is incredibly fun to do. I do it because this is the best way I've found in my life to make friends with some of the best people I've ever met and am ever going to meet. And I do it because it's how I make sense of the world. And making sense of the world can sometimes be difficult for me. And if I found this way to do it, that gives my life such meaning and such purpose and such good feelings, then that's why I do it, because it's the best thing in the world to me. That's really it.
Mike, thanks so much, man. It's a great.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Take care,
Take
brother.
care. Yep.
There he goes. M. Martin. Mike, Mr. Noto. We talked about Frankie's Chrysalis so much. Let's hear that one. I'll play us out on that, and then I'll close out the show. This is Coordinated Suicides with Frankie's Chrysalis that we will be playing momentarily. This is why I do it live, folks. This is live business. Of course, this is off of the This Could Be Heaven record, where it has those eyes that I didn't notice in the album cover, which learned something new, even myself on this show. Anyway, here you go. Frankie's Chrysalis. Coordinated suicides. That is off of the This Could Be Heaven record. One of my favorite records of last year, actually. Very good. Check it out if you haven't already, if you don't already know it. Hey, I'd like to thank Mr. M. Martin for coming on the show. It was a long road to getting him on here. It just never seemed to work out. But yeah, obviously very thoughtful, creative dude. Check out Caryatids. Check out the Coordinated Suicides record. Go back, check out that Pink City stuff, solo record, all that stuff. And thank you for checking out this show, Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. That is what you've been listening to, and I thank you very much for that. The show streams live. YouTube and Twitch, usually Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. You can find the archives for free, protonicreversal.com, always free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. But if you like the show and want to get episodes sooner, you can accomplish that goal with $1 a month at patreon.com/protonicreversal. Gets you advance access, helps support the show, so on and so on. Thanks to everyone for listening to the show, first of all, but also sharing it around, liking, subscribing on your platform of choice, all that good stuff. It's much appreciated. And it's just a nice thing to do. Leave you a review. Silly as that sounds. All that helps people discover the show, and it beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords. Just start nice to do. Again. Tom Flynn coming up. Fang. Suboptics. Antler Family.
Turns sound into electricity.
Star Pimp. Anyway, stay safe out there.
Can you hear me now?
And check you later.
Out on Route 128, dark and lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. There is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? leaves the transmitter, circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency, hey, hey! This